Roundtable, go ahead.
Is this thing on? Yes, it is. All right. Thank you, Ms. Sweeney. It's a pleasure to have you here today. And thank you to the participants of the Roundtable. We appreciate you taking the time on your schedules. My name is Shane Matson. I'm a past president of the Osage Producers Association and a past producer in Osage County. And I'm going to be the moderator for today's event. So I've put together a brief slideshow to outline what the producers in the room know and what many of the shareholders and the council know as well. And what's transpired here in Osage County, which is a very different story than what you shared today with federal and Indian lands and energy development. So it takes me a minute to get used to this. All right. So July 14th of 2014 turns out to be an important day. As a geologist, we look to the past to explain the future. And that's how I approached this presentation today, is looking to the past and what has transpired to us as producers and to the beneficiaries of the mineral estate. The success of Oklahoma oil production mirrors the success of all oil production in the United States. We were in a period of long decline through the 80s, and we have seen a remarkable increase in production across the country and in the state of Oklahoma through horizontal drilling and multi-stage hydraulic fracture stimulation. This is a well count spud date by year, sources IHS. Blue is the state of Oklahoma. You can see the y-axis is, we peaked a little bit over 5,000 wells per year. We run from 2000 to 2019, and down here at the bottom, in black is the number of wells that were spud in Osage County. So this is a comparison of Osage versus the state of Oklahoma. And we have always held a 5 to 6% of all wells drilled in the state were here in Osage County because of the oil-rich reservoirs we all know so well. The red star will be July 14th and 14th. You can see here, not very well because it's down low, but production or spud dates from 2009 up increased dramatically, as evidenced by the blue arrow. Whereas in Osage County, they began a notable trend downward in 2014. This is Osage County on its own. I've magnified it, the scale, so that it's a little bit more easy to see, but we peaked at around 350 wells back in 2008. It was a very busy Bureau of Indian Affairs Osage agency. I remember Melissa Curry, they were always running around. It was, but they got it done. And we've seen a decrease from 2009 and a collapse in new wells being drilled in 2014. This is Osage oil production by month from 1985 to 2019. And you can see that it mirrors the state of Oklahoma with a long decline from 1986 associated with depressed prices. And beginning in 2000, it began increasing through horizontal drilling by the company Sahel Corporation and Amvest. Amvest was drilling horizontal coal bed methane wells, and Sahel was experimenting, a pioneer actually, in horizontal oil development of the Highway 60 trend. But in July of 2014, it began declining. Right here. So, up, down. Here's the average daily production from about 2011 to June of this year. And you can see that we are on an incline and then a decline. There's July 14th of 2014. While this is happening, the largest engineering project in the United States oil field is happening in Osage County with the CO2 Plug of the Burbank field, one of the most amazing assets that the United States has, and it's here in Osage County. It's produced 7 700 million barrels of oil. And the CO2 Plug is remarkable that it's actually really working. It goes from 200 barrels a day, and it's climbing to over 2,000 barrels a day. And we heard yesterday from Purdue that they anticipate reaching 4,000 barrels a day next year. And this is a remarkable and something that we should all be championing. But despite that, production is still going down. This is daily production in Osage County if we subtract out the CO2 flood. And you can see it's a significant decline. And this is what all the producers in this room, exclusive of Purdue, are facing. And this is a regulatory issue. It is not a price and not a commodity price. Osage producers, we thrive in difficult environments. The geology is favorable for drilling in a low commodity price. Twice, the Osage Producers Association sued the Department of Interior in the last 3 years, once with the Osage Minerals Council. And in this suit, we have a declaration of Robin Phillips, our superintendent. And she stated that the agency prepares monthly production reports for the council. The reports identify gross barrels of production royalties paid each year by each producer for that given month. And according to the data that we have that is reflected in these reports, production on the Osage Mineral Estate for the period of January the 1st, 2015 to June 30th of the same year, 2015, was consistent with a 2% decrease as compared to the same period of the previous year. This is a 6-month snapshot, roughly taken 5 months after our July 14 that we started with. And in that, that's true. There's the gross barrels per month in January and gross barrels a month in June, and the decline is 2%. But the CO2 in that same period went from 33,000 barrels to 53,000 barrels for an increase of 60%. The percent of Osage production at that period beginning was 8% of all Osage production was from the Burbank CO2 project. Then represented 14% 6 months later. From January 15 to June, we lost 60% of our non-CO2 production. From July 13 to 2019, there's been a 42% decline in non-CO2 production. The total production from Osage County has fallen as well. The Burbank can't fix this. It's not big enough to keep production flat. We as producers are all going out of business because we can't deploy capital fast enough. It's a capital-intensive industry, and we need a regulatory environment that supports and respects that capital intensity. We need permits to not take 1 year. We need them to take 2 months. We need workover permits to happen within days. We need emergency approval to be verbal. There's so much strangulation that we're all facing. The producers here are trapped. I'm no longer a producer, went out of business and reinvented myself in Pawnee and Payne County. But many of the producers here have been here for decades. And the story of Indian lands in the United States and federal lands in the United States are not happening here. They should be, though. We've always mirrored the state. The geology supports that. And the men and women gathered here are experts in various components and why this is the Producers Roundtable. They can share what is happening with federal regulations. But this letter on June the 14th, this declaration by Robin Phillips, which is part of the lawsuit, is what we've been dealing with. It's misleading. Technically, production fell 2%. But the biggest engineering project in the oil patch at the time had increased dramatically, 60%. And if this is what's being reported to Washington, D.C., we don't stand a chance. We as producers need to be a part of this conversation and education. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars going to D.C. We've met with the Secretary of Interior and their assistants. But there's so much movement there that nothing comes down to help us with real world problems. And with that, I'd like to begin the producer's forum. We'll take questions at the end. Mrs. Sweeney will be leaving for her home in Alaska. I bet it's a beautiful flight today over the mountains. Oh, that's right. It won't be as beautiful. The mountains are incredible. But the men and women here will take questions at the end. This is not a complaining session. This isn't a describing session. And there are a lot of important ears in the audience. The Mineral Council being the most important. Standing Bear, and with Chief Standing Bear. So at the end, there's cards on the table. You can write a question down, and we'll field them. But again, be respectful. That's what we always do. We always move with our heart first. Our first speaker today is William Pipestem. He's a founding partner of Pipestem Law. He's dedicated his career to protecting the rights of tribal governments and the American Indians. A graduate of Stanford Law and Oklahoma State University, Wilson founded Pipestem Law in 1999. He's also a founding partner at Leeton Consulting, a federal advocacy firm representing Indian tribes. Wilson served as lead counsel in the Osage Nation versus United States, a case in which the nation agreed to settle for $380 million. Please join me in welcoming William. If there isn't, there's one here.
Oh, there you go. There's 3 microphones. Can you hear me okay?
No. You got to double tap it.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Well, I appreciate it, and I know yesterday I was able to speak at one of the breakout sessions about the terror regulation that Assistant Secretary Sweeney said would be finalized in December, which is good news. As part of that, I talked a little bit about the Osage Mineral Estate and the place that you are today, and where Osage is, we call our home. This is our homeland. And just to give some background on how we ended up here, our last reservation was in Kansas, and a man named Ladianke was asked to come to this place, and I have relatives and descendants of that manor here. My dad used to describe him as a prophet, and they relied on him to come, and he came and he said there was something here that would allow our children and our grandparents to not starve. And so the Osages came here, and there was something about this place. It was rocky land that turns out had more value than I think the Cherokees maybe, and the federal government, who we purchased from the Cherokees. And the value of the land was not as known at that time. But settled in different communities here around Gray Horse and Hominy and Pahuska, different places. But as a result of the allotment era, there was a law that was passed we generally call the 1906 Act. And that law and amendments to that law have created a unique panoply of laws, along with tribal laws and regulations that deal with Osage minerals production. So the land that you're on right now, every inch of the land within the Osage Reservation, which is contiguous with Osage County, Oklahoma, has a trust relationship. The minerals that are beneath these lands are held in trust for the Osage tribe. And we have the only hybrid system in America where the minerals are held in trust. The surface estate is severed from the subsurface estate, and individuals own surface land. So if you own a home on the Osage Reservation, that may be in fee simple land, but there's no one who owns land within the Osage Reservation that owns the minerals. So it's a reserve to the Osage tribe. So those minerals also, under the 1906 Act Mineral Trust, and how that system works, is that the federal government has an obligation by federal statute to identify and help produce minerals from this reservation. There's one of the amendments to the 1906 Act even refers to this as a highest purpose of the land here. And so in 1906, the Congress said, we're going to task the Secretary of the Interior to identify all living Osages and their children. And in 1908, a roll or a list of Osages was created. And on that roll, each person would receive two rights. One is the right to receive surface land allotments. And then the second right was called a head right. And a head right is the right to receive the proceeds from the minerals, from funds that are the result of minerals production on the reservation. So the money does not go to the Osage Nation government for spending programs. The money goes into federal accounts. The government invests those dollars in the short term. And then every 3 months, those dollars are segregated and paid out to head right holders, some of whom are Osage, some are Indians of other tribes. About 25% of them are non-Indians or non-humans because of our crazy history here. And so if you've read Killers of the Flower Moon, you can get a better sense of how some of those crazy things happen that aren't so good. Part of that history means that we have a unique trust system under the 1906 Act and amendments where minerals through a lease, typically, are entered into with used to be the Tribal Council, now it's the Minerals Council. There is production of minerals, and the monies that are proceeds from those are paid into now the Office of Special Trustee. The Special Trustee invests those dollars, and then for just 3 months or less, and then the monies are paid out to individual head right holders. So that is a unique system in this country. But Osage Nation law, as a sovereign, the tribe also has its own laws related to Osage minerals production that are by law not inconsistent with federal laws. But the Minerals Council has the authority to exercise its rights of the sovereign, to enact regulations and to help and to help produce minerals. So I think the interesting thing you'll see, the Osage Minerals Council, I believe, is on the verge of several significant positive developments. We're working with a group of Osage Nation annuitants or head right holders. They brought forward changes they want to see in the Constitution. And we worked together, and so now we're on the verge of putting something out to the public to see how the beneficiary, the tribe, and the head right holders, how they will operate as a matter of law vis-a-vis each other. And so that is a very significant development. For the Minerals Council to decide they are going to take some authority in regulation and to try to make energy this, as Assistant Secretary Sweeney called it, strangulation by regulation. The Minerals Council is looking for ways to free themselves of the strangulation that they're under through their exercise of their own sovereign power. Working with Principal Chief Standing Bear, who's been a great partner of the Minerals Council, and the Osage Congress, who's been open with the Minerals Council, solving problems. Together, there's efforts to try to work together when it comes to the possibilities of a Terra. Now, if the rules don't come down in a way that that fit the Osage and our interest, then we won't be able to take advantage of it. But with the Minerals Council saying our first obligation is to our head right holders, if there's more opportunity there. The Principal Chief himself, he's a head right holder. He understands that. He's been a great partner with them. So we're trying to solve problems together. But you're seeing this difficult numbers about production here, and from the Minerals Council perspective, and as their legal counsel, there's a great effort to try to solve those problems, working as the trust beneficiary with these different federal agencies, with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, with the Fish and Wildlife Service. There's been a lot of effort that's gone into that to try to, the strangulation is a good way to put it, to try to free these things from our, around the necks of ourselves and our business partners in a way that preserves this environment of our homeland and understands the interest of biodiversity and trying to solve those problems within our own expertise and with the experts that we hire. So that's the system we have, and that's sort of the the good work that the Minerals Council has been doing.
Thank you, Mr. Pipestem. Our next presenter is, please give a. Sure. Safe travels. Dr. Carrie Hall is an assistant professor of ecology and biology education at the University of New Hampshire. After completing an 8-year active duty career in the United States Air Force, Dr. Hall completed her Bachelor of Science in Biological Sciences and her Master's of Science in Biochemistry at the University of Tulsa, and then completed a dual-track PhD in Ecology and Evolutionary Biology and Biology Education at Idaho State. She then continued her postdoctoral training in her first faculty position at a small liberal arts college in South Dakota before joining the University of New Hampshire faculty in Biological Sciences in the fall of 2015. Dr. Hall and her husband and business partner, Dr. Daniel Howard, are currently advising the Osage Minerals Council on the American bearing beetle mitigation via conversion of the mineral estate's property in Chase County, Kansas, as a conservation area and other means. Would you please welcome Dr. Carrie Hall?
Thank you, and I appreciate the invitation to be with you today. And from my affiliation with the Cherokee and the Shawnee tribes, I say Osio and welcome, and thanks for having us here today. So I grew up in Broken Arrow, just outside of Tulsa. I realized very early on that being outside and being in this great state of Oklahoma was just the most wonderful resource to me as a child growing up here. I left for the military when I was 18, 2 weeks out of high school graduation from Broken Arrow High School, and I became a special operations medic with the United States Air Force for 8 years of active duty. And during my time in the Air Force, what I realized was home was incredibly important to me. And so even though I did get to come back for several years, I still consider Oklahoma my stomping grounds. It means so much to me to be back here and to be working through my degrees at the University of Tulsa. And I've continued to work here, and especially in Osage County and the Osage Nation in my entire professional career. After my active duty career, I decided that biology was the way to go. I am very interested in organisms and the relationship with the land and how we as organisms of the land ourselves also treat other organisms that we are living with here in our vicinity. So really my career, the trajectory of my career has been working with people and organisms in their environment and how we can all work together and be healthy to uphold the sovereignty of the people who hold this land. And so working with the Osage Nation since about 2006 has been just one of the highlights of my career. We have worked not only with the American burying beetle, but Dr. Howard and I also work with some of the indigenous tribes in New Zealand, helping them to understand how the resources and living organisms can also be healthy in the tribal lands there. So really, our careers have been about finding ways to help the people and the organisms live together and to also uphold the sovereignty of the people that we work with. And so we're just thrilled to be working with the Osage Minerals Council on this idea. We have some ideas of how we can get the Osage Nation and the Minerals Council to be as productive as you possibly can be and not let this regulation stand in the way. And we think we have some solutions, and we're going to work on those in the coming months and years to help you come to a place where we can find some relief from these regulations.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. Scott Ducharme is president and CEO of Warrior Exploration and Production Company. He formed his own company, JDS Resources, in 1985 and was president of a small public company, Petroc Energy, from 88 to 92. He assisted in the development of Performance Petroleum Company and ultimately became its owner in 2003. The development of Warrior Exploration began with the purchase of several assets from Chaparral Energy Group and has extended into an aggressive development program in both drilling and local acquisition opportunities in Osage County. In addition to his management position at Warrior, Mr. Ducharme is the Chief Executive Officer of Osage Hills Pipeline Company, an affiliate of Warrior. Osage Hills currently operates 124 miles of pipeline, serving 738 square mile area in Osage County with significant expansion potential. Mr. Ducharme graduated from Eastern Michigan University in 1982 with a Bachelor's of Business Administration degree, a major in management, and a minor in marketing and finance. Please welcome Scott Ducharme.
So at the summit, you had the top 4 producers here last evening and today, more than likely. About 60% of the production in this county. We each of us in our different ways, including the CO2 water flood, have all experienced it's difficult to share with everybody how much we've worked on both the American burying beetle, which has been difficult. That's been 5 years, and although it's not the fault of the BIA, and it goes back to Fish and Wildlife and simply Tulsa's office declaring that our 1.2 acre exclusion in Osage County just can't be used. If we could simply turn that around, which I know the council's working on with every ounce of their energy, then at least the American burying beetle part of our studies could be mitigated. And they have lowered the threshold, but we're still a little uncertain what that means yet in preparing a permit application. Now, other things that go along with after you've got your American burying beetle study done, which you can only do basically from July 28th till around September the 15th, you've got that little window to see if you've got a positive or a negative test on the beetle. If it's a negative test, which is about maybe a third of the county is still remaining negative. In our world, up in 2711, we wanted to drill 70 wells this last year and a half or thereabouts. It's been positive studies for 3 straight years. There's so many, as a matter of fact, that on July 29th of this year, we put out 15 different you do these little kind of cool test things. In one of them, it had 25 American burying beetles, and 13 of 15 of the sites that were evaluated were all positive. So it's very, very difficult then for a permit to go through in any less than another 9 months to a year, which is where the frustration has come on all the producers' side. We continue, again, to work with the BIA, the environmental assessment work, things of the nature that we're all working on is to try to bring that time frame down so that we can keep drilling. We'd like to drill a little more. From Bob and I next year, we'd like to drill 41 wells, and we have a plan to put that together and do that. But it's been difficult, and that's what Shane asked me to talk about today, the difficulty from the operator side in preparing these applications.
Thank you, Scott. Mr. Charles Wickstrom, in addition to hiring me twice and never firing me, he's a geologist and a geophysicist in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and a dear friend. During his 40-plus year career, he has worked all of the Mid-Continent basins, the Illinois, the Appalachians, the Rocky Mountains, and the Western Sedimentary Basins of Canada, and the Magdalena Basin of Colombia, South America. He specializes in seismic stratigraphy and is a managing member of Alliance Geophysical LLC, a 3D seismic acquisition company. Through the work of his various companies and joint ventures, he was responsible for the acquisition of several hundred square miles of 3D seismic in Osage County. His first discovery in Osage was in 1979, and since then he has drilled or participated in dozens of vertical wells and horizontal wells in Osage County. His company, Spyglass Energy Group, drilled the Geology No. 1, which is by far the deepest well ever drilled in Osage County at greater than 8,000 feet. Please welcome Charles Wickstrom.
It's a pleasure to be here among my friends with the Osage and other producers. I would like to say something about Charles Hoffman, who hired one of the great oil finders in Osage County, his father before him, A.G. Hoffman, and now his grandson is in the audience. 4 generations, still in Osage County, and I've spent 41 years here. One of the many problems, but particularly that I face as a geophysicist, I rely on seismic data before I drill a well. This reduces the risk. You move the risk of dry holes forward to the cost of 3D seismic now. In order to do that, we have to have permission from the mineral owners to acquire data. And for those 35, 36 years, we always had a blanket permit. Hello. I'm back. I didn't leave. So we relied on a blanket permit from the Osage Mineral Estate that allowed us to shoot seismic, acquire seismic over any area we decided to shoot, regardless of ownership. And that was for 35 years. Recently, when the new, I can't say new CFR, when the old CFRs were being renegotiated, I had 18,000 acres of leases in Osage County, and I was planning to acquire the first year 10 square miles of 3D and drill at least 10 wells. I sent in a request for a blanket permit and was told that we don't do that. And that in order to shoot seismic, I had to own the lease. Well, this has destroyed any incentive to acquire 3D data in Osage County. The cost is prohibitive, the time is outrageous, and in recent experience, we've had zero cooperation from the Bureau of Indian Affairs in dealing with the landowners. Landowners are antagonistic. We've had equipment destroyed. There are several acquisition companies who will not do business in Osage County because of ranchers and farmers having destroyed their equipment. They can't get insurance because in Osage County, they're not protected. And so that's the end of my seismic. Our company is up in Illinois right now acquiring data. As far as my company, we still have production from the Encana properties that we purchased when they exited the county. Devin left the county. We had brought both of our company, Spyglass, was responsible for bringing them to the table in Osage County. And right now, the industry view of doing business in Osage County is anywhere but Osage County. You cannot bring in foreign outside investors. And I have difficulty drilling wells, can't shoot seismic in a meaningful manner. And so I've gone to K County, Illinois, Indiana. Hopefully someday I'll be back drilling wells in Osage County. I need to. Our production is declining with everybody else's. And if you're not drilling new wells and new production, you're going out of business. That's the way the oil business works. My questions for the BIA in Osage County is, one, why are all the fines that are ever filed at the maximum level? The trust responsibility requires that the Bureau of Indian Affairs promote the development of the mineral state. It is doing anything but. I'd say that's in contempt of Congress, but that's a legal issue. I have questions why in the Department of Interior, with the, I don't know if you all are familiar with the wild horses that have been brought into Osage County that you and I pay $1 or $1.30 a day to keep from starving to death out in Utah. But why did the BLM pay over $200,000 for the ranchers to have an exemption from the ABD? And they haven't given a dime to the Osage. In fact, the Fish and Wildlife has come in with regulations that are contrary to the surrounding states. And as Scott said, we could do quite well with 1.2 acre exemption. Other states have 4.5 acre exemptions. Why Osage County gets dinged with these restrictions? You know, conspiracy theory, $380 million. What can I say?
There you go.
Anyway, that's about it. Probably shouldn't go on.
Thank you, Charles. Mr. Fred Storr earned his bachelor's and master's in engineering from the University, Oklahoma State University, in chemical and environmental engineering. He spent most of his career with Phillips Petroleum Company in engineering and general management, and he's been associated with hydration engineering since its founding, has been an active participant in the Osage environmental regulatory process. He's active in the community right-to-know issues, and he established Ill Wind Tulsa and Our Tulsa River to that effort. If you've not visited Ill Wind Tulsa, I would encourage you to do so. He has been a friend of the Osage Minerals Council and the Osage Producers Association, and we would not be where we are today and the progress that we have made without his incredible mind and his ability to write so well.
I want to retract the incredible mind stuff. I don't know where to start, but I'll quit when I start seeing people leave the room. About the $200,000 that the BLM paid to offset potential damage to beetle habitat as a consequence of the wild horse program. Well, what they did was each agency has an obligation to avoid harming species that are listed as endangered. And one of the first things that happened was somebody said that maybe wild horses would destroy beetle habitat. As a consequence of that, there was what's called a Section 7 consultation between the Fish and Wildlife Service and the BLM, and it was decided that the BLM would pay $1 an acre into a fund that would be used to benefit the American burying beetle. About the same time, the Oklahoma Department of Transportation also paid into that fund, and that was to offset highway construction, the federal nexus being the fact that the money for highways comes from the federal government. So that money was actually paid to the Nature Conservancy, and it was used at the Tallgrass Prairie to buy some infill properties and to sponsor some research that I think maybe Dr. Hall was involved in. At any rate, that's probably the last useful money that's been paid for the benefit of the American burying beetle in Oklahoma. Shortly after the 1.2 acre exemption that Scott referred to came and went away, the Fish and Wildlife Service decided to create something called a conservation bank. Conservation banks are not a new idea. They're basically a refuge for some species that's being harmed somewhere. So they decided that we'll create conservation banks in Oklahoma where the beetles seem to live and are happy. And then we will require people that want to do something that might invade beetle habitat, we'll require them to buy credits in the conservation bank. Now, the conservation bank is a private business, and they encompassed about 7,000 acres, and each acre went for $15,000. So it's a $100 million a year business. And the Fish and Wildlife Service set up this conservation bank system and this rule that required presence-absent surveys and the purchase of conservation bank credits on the same day. Okay. About that time, there was this federal lawsuit involving whether or not the Bureau of Indian Affairs had been complying with the National Environmental Policy Act, which they had not. And the National Environmental Policy Act then was rediscovered by the BIA, and the superintendent sent out a letter saying that anybody that wants to apply for a drilling permit is going to have to write an environmental assessment. There was a little problem with that, and which is really never addressed, and that is that writing environmental assessments is not the responsibility of somebody applying for a permit. It's the responsibility of the agency that's going to grant the permit. But the Osage agency laid off this responsibility onto oil and gas operators. That happened at the same time, about the same time, that the beetle was rediscovered, and we started doing these presence-absent surveys. So we do a presence-absent survey, we find out a beetle is there, and if we find beetles, then we go down to somewhere around McAllister and buy credits in the beetle bank. How does that benefit the beetles in Osage County? Well, clearly it doesn't, because Tulsa is a barrier. Beetles are not going to travel across Tulsa. They don't like the lights, they don't like the food, and the cats that live in Tulsa have already eaten all the birds.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. So here we are, started 2015, and we have to write these environmental assessments. The template that we are given to follow in the preparation of environmental assessments is 500 pages long.
Yep.
Now we compare that down, because the first one was for 10 wells, we compare that down to a couple of hundred pages, but it's still a very significant effort. It probably costs about $3,000 to do the paperwork. In addition to that, we go out and do the beetle survey, which costs $1,500. That assumes that you don't find beetles and everything's okay. So in the course of all this, I have written 24 of these environmental assessments. And mostly we have been able to dodge the beetle issues, because a lot of those were well, there were years when you didn't find very many beetles, but since then the beetles seem to be everywhere. They come and go. They have good years and they have bad years. The real problem is not with the highly motivated people that are going to go to the expense and go to the trouble to do this. It's with the traditional operators who may be second and third generation operators who do things in the field themselves, and they are frustrated and demotivated by all of this crap. And those wells don't get drilled.
Thank you, Fred. I think you could have probably gone on for a long time. We've certainly spent a long time speaking about it. At this point, if you have questions for the panelists, please bring them up to the debate here. Is that correct? Okay. Great. All right. The first question is what color socks I'm wearing. Okay. So the first question, and I'll read the question and then determine who takes fields. Petroleum geologists must have open access to drilling and completion geo-records before commencing drilling funds. This is not currently the picture in Osage County. Please discuss. So 2 years ago, I believe, maybe it's 3 now, the superintendent determined that the drilling records in the office there at the agency contained private information that we were not privy to unless we were the lessee or had drilled the well. So we were required to seek permission from the person who drilled the well to gain access to those records. It's ridiculous. Everybody who works in Osage County or anywhere in the oil field does that's ridiculous. There is no proprietary information in there. And contacting Mr. Phillips for permission is not possible any longer due to termed out. Would any of you all like to discuss how we're moving forward to gain access to the records? Maybe Mr. Pipestem, this has been a discussion. So I have an extra question here.
So I know the Minerals Council has identified this as a very high priority. It's a significant problem. We have engaged the federal government agencies about this. We're dealing with the legal barriers of the Freedom of Information Act, where these records are federal records. We have discussed this repeatedly. Now, we just got a cache of documents from certain key areas of the Burbank field. I hope I'm not speaking to the school council. So there's an effort to try to provide those records so they'll be available, but it's a very slow process because FOIA review from a federal agency is an attorney time. So we are looking for other ways to try to solve that problem, but all I can tell you right now is that those solutions are under discussion at this point. The details of the conversations I don't think I can get into, but it's a very intensive effort on the part of the Minerals Council to try to solve the problem.
Shane, I have a comment on this. Years ago, starting back in the late 70s, oil boom going on. DHS is now plugs in petroleum information, sent people into the document room, copied every document and every well file, and put it on their scout cards, and you could pay for it. You could buy that data from them. There was not one thing in those records that's proprietary or secret or anything else, and the fact that the documents go to the Osage, I think they should have the final say whatever happens to them. Thank you.
There we go.
In the schizophrenic behavior that happens at the Osage agency, in the CFRs that were struck down, those CFRs required operators to submit their information for the benefit of offset lessees. So those records that in the CFRs were struck down required us to give this for the benefit of everybody, and now they take the historical and say that they can benefit no one. That's in effect the message. Another headwind affecting the economic limits of wells is water injection restrictions due to earthquakes. How can we as producers work with concerns better than the OCC's 10-kilometer radius? We've all seen the earthquake maps. Curiously, and despite massive volumes of water injection in Osage County going back decades, the Osage has not experienced a lot of earthquakes, very few actually, just in the very far southwest corner. Likely, the geological thinking is that it has to do with the absence of the Woodford Shale, and that's certainly being considered now. Do any of our panelists have any ideas on how to work around water restrictions or injection restrictions? I think I can describe the problem is that we permit a well with the 139, and then we have to re-permit the well, reclassify it as an injection well. Or we take an existing well and we need to convert it into an injection well. Have any producers been successful in drilling an injection well or converting an old well into an injection in the last 3 years? You have?
The permitting process with BIA was slow.
Yeah. Paul Rebar, Osage Mineral Councilman, and producer as well.
The wells that I converted were EOR. They were already existing oil wells that I converted to injection wells. In the Bureau of Indian Affairs permitting process took about 4 months. In the EPA, surprisingly, was pretty quick, very thorough, but I didn't have any issue. They're pretty strict on the injection pressures, maximum pressures. I wish they weren't quite so stringent on that, but I've not really had a problem with that.
So conversion takes about 4 months.
So Paul, is that you qualify those, you classify those as injection wells and not disposal wells? Right.
Not
So not disposal.
This month will be a year we've waited for a conversion.
Okay, so the president of the Osage Producers Association has waited 1 year for a conversion of was it a new drill or
No.
an existing well? To be an EOR or an injection?
Just injection.
Injection. I don't know how we fix that. The EPA, surprisingly, has been cooperative. I mean, I think that's a strange thing for people to hear from a producer. But their mandate is to they have a mandate. They don't have a political agenda. Yes, ma'am.
I've allowed one of mine to be injected with water in Cushing area.
Okay. And that was through the Corporation Commission or through the BIA?
Corporation.
Okay. Yeah, the new Arbuckle disposal wells outside of Indian lands are off the table in personal communication with the Corporation Commission. But injecting into the Wilcox or the Pennsylvania sands or Permian sands is pretty much where the industry is moving to now. Charles, this would be a good question for you. Why do you have to own the lease to do seismic work? This issue again with the common mineral ownership, and Chevron pioneered this in the late 90s, doing 3 very large surveys. They were granted permission by the Osage because the Osage have common mineral ownership. They shot over existing fields operated by other producers, and that database has led to the discovery of millions of barrels of additional reserves, and really the benefit of working in Osage because we can move so quickly. Why do you have to own leases to do seismic work?
Well, that's what the BIA told me. They I couldn't have a blanket Osage County seismic from the Osage.
If you, yesterday I gave a talk on the Mississippi, the future reserves in Osage County are in the Mississippi and carbonates of western Osage County, and they will only be exploited through horizontal drilling, multi-stage fracture stimulation, and 3D seismic acquisition to identify faults. You see all these things, the confluence of them to, it isn't through strangulation, it's condemnation through regulation is what we feel as producers. Any other questions from people that don't want to write and just want to raise their hand? So I think with that, we'll conclude our talk. I want to thank all of you for your time today. And I think we will be adjourning for lunch.